Now this is time for our second panel of the day. This panel is going to be focusing on restorative justice and education, sharing some narratives around healing communities and reimagining accountability. In this panel, we will be talking about how we repair harm, foster healing, and create accountability in educational and community spaces. Restorative justice offers a transformative approach to healing harm, fostering accountability, and strengthening communities. This panel will examine how restorative practices in education and beyond can replace punitive systems which promote healing and empower individuals to drive meaningful change. Now for our panelists. You guys want to show your faces? Oh, there we go. Okay, first we have Supreme Hassan, or on the left. Supreme Hassan is a seasoned restorative justice and trauma healing facilitator with over 3 decades of experience in community transformation. As co-founder of the Transformational Prison Project and the Restorative Justice Working Group at MCI Norfolk, he has led initiatives addressing the intersection of systemic oppression, interpersonal violence, and community healing. A graduate of Tufts University through the Tufts University Prison Initiative of Tisch College, also known as TUPIT, he now serves as a reentry mentor and restorative justice fellow. He is also the founder and CEO of Responsible Party Consulting Group, LLC, bringing culturally competent strategies to institutions and communities across the country. Now, here next to Elyse, we have Swinks Laporte. He is a Haitian American change agent and co-founder of Rebels, an acronym for Raising Entrepreneurs Building Essential Life Skills, a program that uses financial literacy and entrepreneurship to empower system-impacted individuals. After being incarcerated as a juvenile lifer, Swinks dedicated his time inside to understanding systemic injustice and youth development. His mission is to equip others, especially those from marginalized backgrounds, with the tools to alter the trajectory of their lives. With deep personal insight into the failures and potential of our justice system, Swinks brings powerful authenticity to conversations about accountability, rehabilitation, and generational impact. Kentel is a skilled circle keeper, artist, and Tufts University student pursuing a degree in civic studies. A proud alumnus of the TUPIT program, Kentel blends education, storytelling, and music as tools for personal and communal transformation. Through his work with the Transformational Prison Project, his forthcoming podcast, Afterlife, and his creative practice as a poet and rapper known as Stonecatcher, Kentel channels his lived experience into powerful avenues for healing, truth-telling, and restorative growth. He is a fierce advocate for expanding access to higher education for system-impacted individuals. And again, on this panel, as a moderator this time, we have Elyse Martin-Smith, who is an undergraduate at Harvard University studying African American Studies and Social Studies with a concentration in Black artivism, the dynamic intersection of academia, art, and activism. Without further ado, Elyse, I'll pass it on to you to get us started with our panel.
Thank you so much, Wansi, for this incredible event. And I'm so excited to be in the presence of you three. And we'd just like to start off with thinking about, restorative justice as not just a practice, but a way of life. And so I wanted to ask, what was your journey to restorative justice and how would you presently define it? Maybe if we'll start with Supreme and come down the line.
Thanks. What a great question. So I have with me 2 books that from the Little Handbook of Restorative Justice series, right, that I would hope that everyone who will view this recording and is in the audience would read. One is the Little Book of Race and Restorative Justice, and the other is Restorative Justice for People in Prison, right? My journey to restorative justice started inside of prison. And it started inside of prison because humanity was not only marginalized, but dehumanized, and as a result, rejected by prison administrators. And oftentimes, those most impacted by that rejection were the prison's youngest residents. In 2010, on Christmas Eve, of all days, there was a very explosive and very, very extremely violent riot that saw the prison's youngest combatants in. At this time, I'm an older prisoner with considerable influence, skills, and ability to reach out to the entire prison population. And I reckoned at that very moment that we could not do business as usual. So I went on a survey to address all the impact players in the prison. So that meant talking to the Italian mob, the Irish gangsters, the so-called street organizations from throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and impact players from cities such as Boston, Lowell, Lawrence, Lynn, Chicopee, Springfield, and every stop in between. And what I said to him is that we could not continue to allow our community to be disrupted, and it was our responsibility to restore it from a harmed community into a community that begins a process of healing. And that process of healing began first with us humanizing each other through a process of restoration. So my journey to restoration was the universe. The Honorable Martin Luther King Jr. said it best: the moral arc of the universe is long, it bends towards justice. The universe in that prison system was bending towards justice, and it was just us. We had to come together and begin to humanize each other so we would stop, as a figure of speech, banging on each other and begin to turn inwards. As Dr. Ken Hardy said, look at what's going on inside of us. And once we did that, to have that acknowledged. So my journey to restorative justice is by seeing harm and standing up as a responsible party, willing to accept responsibility to repair that harm inside of my community, which just happened to be Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Norfolk at the time.
So I would say my first interaction with restorative justice was in probably 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And restorative justice at that time, it was a requirement for anybody who pretty much wanted to get parole. So it was on my compass, so to say. That's like jail terms for just a list of things you have to do that you check off that make you eligible for parole. So they had the restorative justice. They brought the restorative justice program to Concord. It was the first time they brought it there. I had no idea what it was. I just knew that they said you got to talk about your case in the process, and I was just like, I don't know if I want to do that. And so that was like one of the biggest things that deterred a lot of people from signing up for it, because it was like we grew up in these situations where a lot of the things you do, you never are supposed to talk about it. So I signed up for the program, and then it was a 33 week program at that time, and it was awkward. It's a bunch of us in a circle. Some of the people I was familiar with, some of the people I wasn't, but it was just like being in a vulnerable space with a bunch of people who are of like mind, but still like having to be vulnerable and have to share like personal or intimate stuff about myself. It just made me uncomfortable. But at the end of that 33 week process, I seen the benefit of it, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself in the process. So yeah, I appreciated the whole restorative justice experience, and I think a lot of it the guys that are a little older and more experienced when it comes to restorative justice practice say it's just like no restorative justice circle is the same. So we may have been doing it one way in Concord, but it could be completely different than how they was doing it in Norfolk, where it was at, or Shirley Medium, where they was at. But I feel like the takeaway is always the same.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity. I would have to say the practice probably came when I was like 17, when I was actually convicted of my crime. And I have like 2 pictures in front of myself. So it was the picture of me as a young child and my mugshot. And the restorative process happened there with actually a series of questions, where it's like, how did you go from this straight A student to now hearing a gavel to being sentenced? And that process of asking the questions like, well, what happened during those years, without that period of time, in your thinking process? And going back to, all right, let's look at the crime itself. Like, what were some of the risk factors that surrounded you at a young age to make you commit what you did? And I think that's what started the snowball effect of understanding, like, okay, we need to really start digging in within myself to figure out you know, what's going on and how I need to change. So that was kind of like the initial process of restorative. It wasn't until 2017, roughly around like 17, 18, I started hearing this term being tossed around, like restorative justice, like became like like, you know how TikTok, they start throwing like hashtags around, like hashtag this, and I was like hashtag restorative justice. And I'm like, well, what does this actually entail and what's the definition? And you know, there's like, it changes from group to group. However, the one thing that I seen was like the common denominator is looking like how you can restore the harm that you have done and bring people out of that into healing. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then I've been, you know, it's like with myself first and foremost, but now I have to take it into a larger context and say, how do I do that in a community sense here? So that was kind of like my process and my transition actually.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that into like the tangible, because there are so many buzzwords around restorative justice. So I wanted to ask, what are some examples of how restorative practices have not only healed, but also cultivated leadership and resilience within system impacted communities?
Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, absolutely. What are ways that restorative justice practices have not only caused healing, but also cultivated leadership and resilience in systems impacted communities?
I could speak for myself, like with me, like in the process, I think it was broken down into like 3 phases. And so the first phase, if I'm not mistaken, it talks a lot about your childhood. It spoke about your childhood, and then the second phase was an accountability segment, and then the third phase was you get to hear from a person who was a victim of the crime that you are alleged of. And so the majority of the people that was in the group with me was all loss of life. So they brought in a woman who had lost her son from like, I want to say, probably not gang related, but she had lost her son. And she came in and she spoke about how when the kid that had been convicted of killing her son got convicted, she got up there and gave her impact statement about how she forgave him. And I thought that was so, I thought that was just such a bold move in one sense. And then we talked about like being a divergent in another sense. And a little bit earlier, it was just different. It wasn't something that I'm used to, because a lot of the times when you talk about the legal system, when you talk about the justice system, it's like, oh, this person goes away and this person is convicted, and families are pitted against each other intentionally. And it's kind of like they throwing in the courtroom. The average person wouldn't know, but Commonwealth kind of throws gas on the situation to the point where it's like, and I've been in situations where I've spoken to people, like my mother, for instance. I'm going to speak from our statement. I had 2 older brothers that got killed. So my mother could speak about having a son who killed someone, and my mother could speak about having to be in a courtroom for 2 of her other sons that got killed. So, and she spoke about how both times, like when it was going in there for me, it was like, oh, she was getting the side eye, but when she went in for my other brothers on the victim side of things, it was like they treated her in a certainly different manner. So just hearing that from her, and I never knew how to really deal with that. It was like my mother I would have all these discussions with my mother, and never really, she would talk about how she grieved and how she felt about certain issues, and I would never know how to comfort her at any level. And then being in that restorative justice space and being able to talk to Clarissa and get a sense of what she was feeling when she lost her son, because empathy was something I never had even thought about before. I was just like, hey, I did this and whatever, do these programs, and hopefully it makes me eligible for parole. But when you sit in a restorative justice circle, it's like, no, it's you sitting in this circle. At that time, it was like you describe what your case was, and then they go around to each individual in the circle, and each individual in the circle asks you like specific questions on how you could have handled that in a different manner. And that in itself was like, I never experienced nothing like that ever in my life, because it was like I had to answer for a lot of the things that I had done, and answer open-heartedly and honestly. And that gave me a lot of time to reflect on what I had did. Because up until that point, I was like, it is what it is. But then once I got to speak to Clarissa, and once I got to sit in that accountability circle, it was like, hold on, maybe I was wilding, and maybe my thought process is wrong, and maybe these street ideals that I'm anchored to because of some false sense of loyalty, is wrong. And that was the first time I really got to challenge any of that. So that's what restorative justice personally did for me. It was just that opportunity to be able to see myself in the mirror, and had other people that I respect highly hold me accountable at the same time.
Could you restate the question?
Absolutely. What are some examples of how restorative practices have healed harm, but also cultivated leadership and resilience within systems impacted communities?
Oh, thank you. So last year I hosted a conference, right? And the theme of the conference was restorative justice theory in practice. We have theorem and then we have praxis. Restorative justice is a philosophy, practices that must be exemplified and lived out. It's through the exemplification of these practices that this process begins to take place. This process begins with the responsible party taking a step in leadership by standing up and publicly apologizing. That public apology could be to a person one-to-one, or it could be to an audience that's like the one that's in front of us. When that apology takes place, oftentimes it's the first time in the harm party's life, and the harm party could be an individual, could be a community, that they have received some antidote of healing because now they know it wasn't their fault. When harm takes place, trauma ensues. When trauma ensues, it begins to recreate itself in what's known as small t trauma. That small t trauma are the things that happen in our lives every day that have become normalized. So it's okay for me to grow up in the hood and bang. It's okay for me to grow up in the hood and sell drugs, because my entire community is numb to the fact that we're causing harm by banging and selling drugs. So when small t traumas mitigate, they explode into big trauma. Leadership in restorative justice happens with us as responsible parties, accepting responsibility and being willing to be held accountable in a realistic way. My relationship with leadership and restorative justice is just that. I had to stand up first within my own self and heal from what Dr. Ken Hardy and Tracy Laszlo in the book Tears of Her called self-inflicted wounds. Oftentimes, I've told myself this lie is okay. It was okay to do all the things that I was doing. So I had to reverse the polarity of that lie and tell myself the truth. Yo, it was not okay. It was not okay. It was not okay. And that made me carry the shame and guilt I was living with a little bit lighter, stand up a little bit stronger. Now I can recognize the harm I caused to the brother I murdered. And it was some mitigating factors that led up to that. I too lost a brother to murder, but it was the epitome of this vicious cycle that Brother Kentel talked about of normalizing our behavior in urban communities and increasingly suburban communities as well. My brother killed my other brother because they heard me repeat a mantra that I heard my other brothers repeat a mantra. And that cycle would only break when I accepted responsibility for teaching him the wrong thing. Again, we're beginning a healing process, a slow healing process. I could not recognize the harm that my actions caused my mother without recognizing the harms that it caused the brother in my criminal offense that I murdered, Tom. This is leadership. This is leadership in a very practical way. They say leaders know the way, go the way, and show the way. So for our very first annual restorative justice conference inside of the prison, the one thing I said had to be present was a sincere public apology ceremony. And in that ceremony, mothers like Janet Connors, Isoria Mendes got to witness that. And when they came back the next year, as part of the planning process, Janet Connors said to me, and I remember it, I will never forget it. She said the public apology ceremony sustained me for an entire year because she would never get that from the responsible parties in her child defense. But I'm happy to say she eventually did from 2 of the 3. Leadership begins with accountability. The restoration process or practice begins with myself as a responsible party standing up and saying, I want to be held accountable in a realistic way. Then you think about where we come from, where we don't even talk about the stuff we did. So you're a unicorn when you stand up and you do those things. So the intersectionality between leadership and restorative justice, to quote Dr. Brene Brown, you got to dare greatly. You have to dare greatly because you're going against the grain of everything that's been normalized. Peace.
I think I'm just gonna reiterate everything that they just said. But it just really falls down to those 3 things that they spoke about: accountability, vulnerability, and impact. Look, accountability is, I Kentel was saying, some people would justify their evil, right? Or they'll justify a lie, they'll justify their position just to be like, no, that was because everybody wants to just seem like angels in the eyes of everybody. It's just like, no, it was a white lie. I didn't really do that. I just did that. But it's still like, it's so hard for people to just take accountability sometimes. As we can see, just look at the news. Yeah, our president, I'm being a little inflammatory, but it's hard for him to just say, I was wrong. I'm sorry that I did something. Sometimes that's really difficult for people. So restorative practice has you sit down and just like pinpoint, like, all right, maybe you wasn't the person that was like frontlining, but you were indirectly part of it. So now you can trace the ripple effect of how you harm somebody, or how your act, or how your part played into something larger than yourself sometimes. Some people you have to really sit down and be like, hey, look, this is how you actually impacted somebody. So accountability is a little difficult for you. I know it was for myself. It's like, nah, but I'm not the one that sent them. I just sent them in the house, but I didn't do this. Like, you would justify your position just to make yourself seem like nothing, you didn't do anything wrong. So that's the first thing. Vulnerability, it's really difficult. Again, like just having accountability, it's really difficult for somebody to just be like, you know why I did that to you? It's because I was jealous. Like that's hard in front of other men. I know for women, it's just like, girl, you was looking so good. I don't know, maybe it is like this with you. I don't know. But I know for me, you know, girl, you was I don't know how it is, but for men, we have rap lyrics like Jay-Z that says, guys shouldn't be jealous, that's a female trait. Because you push guys and he push weight. Like, it's really hard for a man to be like, I did that because I was jealous of you. So I'm taking that to the grave. I don't know. He was acting like a BAN. You'll say anything else, but the brother looks sharp, man. I'm just jealous. You know what I mean? That's why. Like some people, it's just really hard. So it's even more difficult for men that's incarcerated with this image about themselves. Like you have to be this really tough, like have this tough exterior. So to have men sit in a room for so long that never even been taught how to just be vulnerable, just as men and as black men, black and brown men, and being like, no, it's okay to cry. Go ahead, bro. Let her know. She hurt you, didn't she? Or some men be like, yeah, somebody touched you. Like it takes a lot for some people to come out and say that. But restorative practice, once you feel comfortable, those things is kind of like second nature. And the third thing is impact. You gotta be real careful about this. There's a difference between somebody just being productive and he has everything going on. Nothing's getting done. All these great ideas, but you can't really pinpoint one thing to just be like, but that made an impact on one life. Or there's one thing that you said you was gonna execute, it actually did this and it fed 12 people over here. Or we clothed 10 people, or these young pregnant women out here, we was able to do this for their children. It's just like we have all these grandiose ideas and there's no impact. These three things, I believe, you have to see these within leaders. Like, it's, you have to, like, it was hard for Biden to sit there and be like, yeah, we was wrong about what we did to Black people. Like, that was hard, but that's part of leadership. Standing in front of people and just taking accountability and being vulnerable like that. And they say, you know what, but this is what we're gonna do though, to make some impact. And I ain't gonna talk about if you did or not, but I'm just saying, as leaders, it has to be some type of measurable result. To be like, well, they fed 100 people though. Now 100 people still strapped, like, no, they fed 100 people, clothed 100 people, and this happened. So like, this is what restorative justice is about, what the brothers was actually talking about.
And thank you for exemplifying the leadership just in your responses and creating that community here with folks that you may not know yet. I think that brings up the question of, like, how do we implement these practices in communities that might find resistance to it, whether that be Black communities, whether that be the criminal legal system itself. So what are the possibilities and challenges of implementing restorative practices?
I don't, to be honest, it's kind of like a little bit of what, Kirsten was saying earlier. I'm not the person to be trying to convince anybody anything. I just rather be example of what we stand for and, show it through that, man. I go inside DYS 3 times a week, and, 2 of them in Boston, one in Middleton, and it covers a couple regions. And I sit in restorative justice spaces with the young kids from like ages 12 to 21. And sometimes we do hold circles. And you know how gangster some of them circles could get, or how powerful some of them circles could get. And some of them kids are in there for, like, one unit is all kids locked up for a loss of life, and it might be like 10 of them, let's say. So it's like I can't go in there and ask them to rip open these trauma-based wounds their whole time while they're every Wednesday I go in there, it's just, all right, we're gonna sit in a circle. No, you can't do that because it's too much sometimes. So sometimes I just gotta go in there like, yo, you know what? Forget the circle. Yo, what up? What up? How you doing? How you feel? Like, you know what I'm saying? And you gotta you modify like that what restorative justice is to the situation. And that's what I feel like I find myself doing. But as far as like convincing people who don't believe in the practices to that this is like something that's useful to like us as a community, I don't really care for it. I just rather be an example for it, an example of it, and hopefully people come around. If they don't, you know.
I appreciate that. And even I remember your original response was saying, you know, you were hesitant when you were first approached by these practices, especially when they were coming from the system itself. And so I'm curious too, maybe I'll pass it to Supreme to think about how you were able to cultivate a restorative community from inside by your own community.
Well, this is such a great question. I have so much respect for my brother's response and approach too.
He's not gonna tell you how combative we was too. I'm like the younger, they come to us, we like, yo, bro, nah.
And that's, you know, just to like look at context and then let's look at scale. I served 33 years. I'm 53 years old. I was in prison before my brothers, my fellow panelists. I came to restorative justice before my fellow panelists. I had the responsibility of having vision to first introduce, propagate, establish, and then scale something. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. The simplicity in it is the practice itself. I had the wonderful fortune of sitting with academic leaders that were often white women. As a Black man with knowledge of myself, this is why I love the theme of this panel, restorative justice in education. Education comes from the root the root of education comes from the Latin, educe, to pull out. When I look at it through that lens, restorative practices is not to solicit anything. So we're not trying to convince anybody about anything. The idea is to pull something out of everybody. And I was effectively able to do that over 2 years of persistent approach of the warden of MCI Norfolk, through their director of treatment, through their deputy of program, when they said they didn't understand what restorative justice was. Like most people in society do not understand what restorative justice is. So it's like, it sounds great, Supreme, but what is it? I went this very same book. It has so much history in it. It has so much wear and tear. This was the very first book that was given to me by my co-founder of the Transformation of the Prison Project, Johnny Keegan. This was the same book I gave to a prison superintendent to read when they said the governor was going to come into the prison and sit in circle with us. And he said, "What else do you have for me to read?" The Bible says in this way, where there is no vision, the people will perish. So there was a definite vision to this movement. The impact of this movement is this panel right now. Because it went from a singular idea to the development of a circle or a team, to the building out of not one, but two, but three programs, to the incorporation of a program, the Transformation of Prison Project, which I'm so proud of the young men that are leading that organization today, to giving freedom, my brother said, that the parole board mandated vision. I said, we're going to stop the Massachusetts Parole Board from recommending the CRA as its end-all be-all for us to get released. And we did that. Impact. Then the parole board began to say, you have to do restorative justice. Impact. Today, we're quantifying exactly how deep this impact runs. I think all of us on this panel, my brother in the audience, know countless men who got out in large part because they did the program. Impact. Vision. In business, we have to persuade people to look into our proposals. We have to persuade people to buy in. We have to persuade people to invest. But the greatest investment was the one internal. The buy-in that the men on the compound gave. You cannot deny numbers. Impact. The very first year of our flagship program, the Restorative Justice Responsibility Retreat, 106 people, 165 people signed up. The next year, 203. Every year after that, 44 people would sign up to attend that program. And it's not including the outside guests, which was from 12 to the first year to 2017, where I got extrapolated out of that prison because I was working while Black. I was doing liberatory work. There were 85 community members that came inside of the prison. Impact. Vision is there. But I'm so proud of us because we're just getting started. We want to impact the educational system. We want to impact corporate America. We want to impact religious institutions with a new way to show up. Human-to-human interaction, where we're no longer looking up at the head of a board, but sitting in a circle and valuing the insight, the mind, and the ability of everyone there, college degree or not. Please.
So I break it down to this. When you said trying to get or persuade the group, 10% of people are going to be opposition. There's no back and forth no matter what you do. Like the earlier panel, like, oh, how do you do it? And the brother said, he's like, well, why do I have to waste my time trying to convince some people who are already bent on a position? That's the 10%. They're not moving from that. That's their constituents and that's their group. They standing on that. And then there's another 10% that you know, is part of your group. They think like you, like your ideas, they get very creative with it, innovative. That's another 10%. And you have the 80s just like, they don't know. But we like to do this. We focus on the 10%, they're like, okay, let's get creative on how we can get them to come back to, forget them. We have a whole 80% of people that's just like, I don't know who to believe, because this side is really saying some good things. My opposition do say things that make sense. It's just like, I'm not gonna go completely there, but I heard what you said. I agree with that point, but I think you're just kind of just putting it in a position where it fits your narrative. So we keep going back and forth, and then we have a whole 80% of people, we just like, let them go and find whatever they want. So we need to shift towards the 80% of people that just saying, okay, let's get creative on how we can bring them into a restorative space and what that looks tailored specifically for them. Forget our group. You gonna ride with me, you gonna ride with me. I don't gotta convince you of nothing. It's already in you. It was already in us to be like, all right, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. The 80% is the energy that we don't even spend time on. Like something is tailored specifically for them and how we should get them to look at things restoratively. Not from how we want it, because you already sold. But for them, like, let's get creative on that. And that's the approach that I take. Like, all right, if I talk to a person, I'm like, oh, he's a 10%. I can't say anything to you. It's like restorative justice. That sounds like, what's that? They got terms now. I don't even know terms. They use so many terms just to get like not talk about restorative justice. Like 10% just gets, they get very, it's like gymnastic with their vocabulary when it comes to like restorative justice. It's like, it's gonna change, right? It's gonna be like restorative justice. It's like term that means like this. Like it's not like, yeah, I don't got time to keep battling with you because your vocabulary is gonna get very increased on how you don't wanna sit there and talk about, oh, okay, that's your side. But if I'm talking to somebody that's just like, I don't know anything about that, I heard this, then I can have a conversation like, okay, is it coming from facts? Is it coming from opinion? Or just coming from something that's already made up in your mind? Now we can start I can start a dialogue with that person and choose whatever side you want.
David was having a discussion with somebody. He said that the lady was like, "What are you gonna?" He said the lady was like, "What are you gonna say when somebody tells you that restorative justice is soft?" He got so mad. He got so mad that he reacted the way she wanted him to react. And I said, he's like, "Yo, I rashed." I said, "Bro, why did you get so mad about that?" What she asked, it was a legitimate. It had merit.
Because they don't know.
So what did you get mad? And David, he thought about it after. Now he's hearing it from me, and it's different, like coming from me, because I said it softer. Yo, bro, why did you even get mad about that? Then he thought about it, and then he was like, "Damn, you're right." I was like, "Yo, bro, like, yo, what she's saying has merit, bro. You think there's people that don't think like that?" And then he was like, "Yeah, nah, you're right." It's like, damn, I should have. And now he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have responded like that." I'm like, no, like, it's trial and error. It's trial and error.
But even in that example, the humility to be able to say, I shouldn't have responded like that, shows the power of restorative justice in that emotional intelligence, in being able to ask difficult community questions. And so I'm wondering, like, too, how we've talked about youth with the Department of Youth Services, and also we're currently in this school environment that is still oppressive to Black communities. We had the Law, Education, and Justice team that I mentioned last time, which unfortunately was cut after 5 years. And so Harvard actually currently has no program within carceral facilities at this moment, and has never had a degree-bearing program through Harvard. So I wanted to ask, how can schools, universities, and local governments invest in restorative justice in ways that are sustainable, not symbolic?
So, great question. Well, actually, that's one of the missions of that vision. It was one of the things that I was taught as a 5% of that. The people we want to get most are the young people in the streets, and young people like you all on college campuses. And then we want to bring you together. And that ties into a lot of what Ali put forth with regards to the 10%. There's actually a law, it's called the Law of Diffusion of Innovation, right? And the law of diffusion of innovation talks about the innovators. 2% of the people in the world anywhere are innovators. Then it talks about the early adopters, those who are early to come around to the innovation. Then there are the adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. It's like social media. Something's popping on social media, a couple of people hit it, a couple more people hit it, then it begins to trend. And next thing you know, it's a new thing, right? So with regards to colleges and universities, that has always been a part of the vision. So I had the privilege of teaching for 7 years while at MCI Norfolk, a graduate school class between Harvard Divinity School and BU School of Theology that would come in every year in the month of February. We would start at 6:40 and go sometimes up to 10:40 with this class. And what I realized is that a lot of what we were dispensing with became codified in some of these programs, in some of these centers. It's okay. The mission is, now how do we partner in a comprehensive way that does not continue the legacy of slavery and oppression to Black and brown people, does not continue the legacy of co-optation? Because we're so damn intelligent and wise that, and by we, I'm talking about my colleagues who are what they call returning citizens. I don't like that term. I don't think I've ever been a citizen of these United States of America. So those of us who are coming home as emergent citizens, because we still have to show and prove that we're worthy to penetrate the halls of Harvard, Northeastern, Emerson College, Boston College, Boston University, Wheaton College, but we're doing it. It's so beautiful that you asked this question. I was just in discussion this morning with a colleague of mine, Jose Bo. He's been out 15 years, served time for manslaughter. 3 years after his release, he was given full tenure as a college professor to teach restorative practices. And we're talking about that right now. How do we bring restorative practices in schools from the earliest possible incision point to the collegiate level? And I'm so proud of my team. We literally have a 15-week or semester-long curriculum to teach once we penetrate these ivy towers. So education is indeed the necessary means for a full and complete liberation. And we just won't stop until we get it.
I'd love to pass it to Swinks here, just to hear, also with your experience at 17 years old, and that still being in a period of schooling, of a period that should be of education. And I'm curious how you might respond to the question of investing in restorative practices.
For universities? Or
Or-
just,
It could be universities, but I'm gonna let you take that the way that where would you like to see restorative practices invested in?
I haven't even thought that far into like universities, I'm gonna be real.
Absolutely.
As far as the urban community, I just hope that we start making our own institutions where we could just make things culturally responsive. No matter if it's our curriculums and our approach to everything that's really tailored to our demographic. Like you were saying, like there's so many federal fundings that's being taken away from just the inner city, just to educating the youth about things that are relevant to their life. So before we can even talk about how can we get to Harvard, I mean, this kid has to make sure that he dodges a bullet to make it to elementary. So my restorative thing is like, let's get the impact players within our communities that can really reach like Kentel who goes in the DYS. It's like, this kid's not even, I was never thinking about Harvard, like, you know, you have your image about college and higher ed. But it's like, it's not that I don't want to go to Harvard. It's like, I got so many different things that I have to dodge before I could even think about that actually being an option. So like, at least starting on the ground level for myself, it's like, let's at least let's keep the kids in the classroom by making things that are culturally responsive. Removing some of this, my biggest thing is like, let's remove some of these socioeconomic disadvantages that's making me think about, well, I'm hungry, I'm gonna pick up this book. Like, That ain't making sense.
Mm.
Like, this book ain't no vehicle for me or viable choice for me to actually put some food on my table with this 50-year wealth gap within our community. So it's like, I don't know what Harvard let them think about that. I'll let Tufts think about how they gonna make restorative justice and all these other institutions that, for me, I think, no disrespect to like the term restorative justice, if it's coming a bad term, whatever, cool. And how the institutions wanna use it, that's for them to think about. I wouldn't even know how to answer that, but on the ground level with the boots on the ground, I'm here in my community, man. Cause it's like, we have our own issues that we understand. And we have to take approaches that in a way that's conducive and tailored to our situation. No one knows best out.
No, that is perfect. And I want to acknowledge one of the folks in National Street Jail when we were doing the musical justice program was arrested by Harvard police. And that was the cause of his first arrest. And so just understanding what's the responsibility of institutions, whether that be these universities, but also the criminal legal system itself. Kentel, I'd love to give you the opportunity to chime in as well.
Answer that. I kind of, my thinking is kind of like his too. It's just like, I'm just doing what I can do right now. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully I'm able to influence or inspire or just being the example. I know being the example is enough because I know where we coming from. A lot of the times we talk about we didn't see the example of what we could be. So we not seeing the doctor. I grew up in a neighborhood where I don't even know anybody's father, to be real with you. So it's like, I'm thinking on a more micro scale where I could just start with myself and I could be that example and hopefully it inspires people along the way. Other brothers that's behind the wall and thinking that gangbanging is just gone, that's the way out, or you know what I'm saying? Just believing in all these trains of thoughts that we just bought into that we believe is gone, end up be our success outs. And so yeah, I'm just like trying to be the example, man. I get messages all the time from inside, still phone calls, and it's like sometimes that should bring me to tears, to be real with you, just because I never seen I never seen myself as the example, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. I be stressed out here sometimes. I be stressed out here sometimes, but it's I see the results. I see the results. I see the outcome, and I see the impact. A little bit about what Supreme was talking about. It's like I see how I'm affecting change, and it's in small ways, and I couldn't ask for more as far as I'm concerned. Like, you know what I'm saying? Everything else would come.
Please, could I hit on the two previous questions, right?
Absolutely.
And so I referenced this book, right? And I should have shared with you the author of the book, which is Fania Davis, right? Fania Davis is this remarkable woman leader, organizer. She had wrote in a 2015 op-ed in the Boston Bay State Banner, one of our local Black newspapers, that she had been involved actively with every major revolutionary movement over the last 40 years. From the Black Power movement to the women's movement to the civil rights movement. She was the tip of the spear in organizing the liberation movement for her own sister, Angela Davis, which was an international movement. She said she was burned out. She said she was burned out. And I'm gonna come back to that point, because we have to take care of ourselves in this process. We have to take care of each other in this process. She said she was burned out after 40 years, seeing very little impact. When the police in Mississippi literally ran up into her house and shot her husband nearly to death, to witness this and keep doing the work. So she took sabbatical to the continent of Akubu land, some of it known as Africa or Pangaea, where she came in contact with Shyman and began to be taught restorative practices. On her return back to the States, she created and founded what's known as RJOY, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. I'm coming back to the educational system. She went into, and there's a connection, there was this beautiful young black man about your age by the name of Reuben Robert from New York. He developed restorative practices to go inside of schools. Together, they reversed the polarity of a high suspension rate and a low graduation rate in the Oakland Unified School Districts using restorative justice practices. And they did it in such a way that they equipped and empowered the young children at the earliest possible ages to know what restorative practice is. And when they had conflict, they would like tell the teacher, "Yo, get off me, I'm going to get a talking stick." And when you heard the implication of a talking stick, you know they were going to hold circles. We know what to do and how to do it, but we also know the legacy of systemic racism and oppression. When I think about a Black Wall Street, when I think about Black people building these independent, thriving communities, and there's always something or someone who comes and shuts it down. I don't see that happening with restorative justice. I don't see it happening with restorative justice. Because restorative justice is not something new. It's taking us back to who we are as original people, as the indigenous people of the world, how we did justice. And it's bringing us up into a place that we recognize all we have is us, all we need is us. I'm gonna jump around just a little bit about science. To bring life into existence, two things have to be happening at the same time. A force has to be going in a centripetal direction and another one in a centripetal direction. They have to be doing it at the same time. Understanding that I embody a both and mentality, not an either or. We need the practical on the ground, but we also need to penetrate these halls as real revolutionaries do and pull from the front. We need to become the teachers who will teach our surrogate children. They might not be your biological child, but they are our children. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes one circle, one courtroom, one corporation, one continent to transform the globe. But it starts with the power of one, not one singular individual, but one mindset, empowering, being empowered and equipped to go out and do it. So I love my brother's example. Yo, let's operate on the ground. But we also have to operate above ground too. Before you know it, they'll look up. And I quote Superintendent Gary Roden, no, Superintendent Sean Medeiros at MCI Norfolk, when the work that we was doing demanded the governor's attention. The governor was the Royal Patrick at a time, said I have to go in there and see what's going on. He sat with us in circle and he said, I don't know how we got here. He said, but I need to know what's going on. So we are the change we've been looking for. It's basically what I'm saying. And in addition to that, you know, and on this note, that is both and, it's never either or.
Can I say something else? You know what I thought was real is I work for Transformational Prison Project, and they got like a pilot program so that they, like certain cases that come through Roxbury District Court, and then it was Brockton too. They're trying to use restorative justice as an alternative to just giving people these crazy sentences. And I thought that was dope. They was like, yo, can you come and speak? I'm from Roxbury, got indicted in the same courthouse when I was 16. And when they asked me to speak, I'm like, I kind of want to be in Roxbury Court again. Like, I'm kind of cool with that. And then I thought about, like, I'm always thinking about, like, you know, the example. And so I'm just like, all right, whatever, I'm gonna do it. And then I went in there and spoke. And then even when I walked in the courtroom, it was just like this whole full circle. And I'm thinking the whole time I'm just like, yeah, I wouldn't even be here if I never sat in that circle. I wouldn't even be here if I never sat in that circle. And I wasn't I didn't work for TPP. I didn't consider like how, like, the harm that I caused myself. I didn't take accountability for stuff. Like, I wouldn't even be in this space to be able to do this and provide like an opportunity like this for people who was in the same situation that I was when I first came in, or something different, or something similar. And so it's like little stuff, little things like that, like, that I see are changing and, for the better. And I don't know, I just be grateful to even be in a position to be in these spaces where we can make things like that happen. Cause when I see the change, we hear a lot about, oh, they're doing this over here, they're doing that. And we not seeing, what's actually the actual outcome of it, but to see it with my own eyes and be a part of it, I was like, oh, it's different. It's hit a little bit different.
Thank you for referencing that agency of like creating community alternatives and in the spirit of a circle, this is gonna be the last question that I ask before opening it up to the whole room to ask questions. But what are you building? And what do you need in that needs-based framework in order to build that? And I'm gonna start here from Swinks.
We're building it's a community. I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day. It's like, it was asking me about some of the projects that I'm doing. I'm like, bro, what we're really doing is building a community. You know, there's this narrative that you have to do everything on your own. You know, you really don't need nobody like this, the strong man, strong woman mentality, but it's like, it's a myth. You know, you need a community, you need the lone sheep gets devoured by the wolf. It's a fact. So what we're doing from my end is really building community and figuring out how we could implement practices that we could really start talking about those things that are so deeply hidden. You know, that's kind of what we're doing.
I feel like my part is just, I don't know, continuing to do the work that I'm doing with TPP. I do it through that. I do it by sitting in them spaces every week. I do it by being the example of what the individuals behind the wall could be, and hopefully to inspire them in the same light. And I do it through art. I do it through music. I do it through writing. I do it through poet. Like I do it through all of that. And so, yeah, those are the major conduits that I feel like are essential when I'm trying to scale this movement or whatever it is. But I just do it in a different way. Like my way of restorative justice is a little bit different probably than the universal one, but it's just as good.
I'll say so. No, I want to thank you, Elyse, for raising up, you know, the restorative gateways, harms, needs, obligations. But one of them that is almost never talked about is community engagement. Without community engagement, we can't get to identify the harms or the needs of the harmed parties, thus the obligations of the responsible parties. So what I do and how I do is I build communities. I build communities. I would say I'm a dynamic builder of communities. You know, there's a scripture that always rings true to me that says, in my father's houses, there are in my father's house, there are many mansions. And I'm learning with greater depth on how to allow those other mansions to come. Building, I've said at the inception of the Transformational Prison Project that we're going to transform the globe, one individual, one circle, one relationship, and one community at a time. And I'm so humbled, yet so proud that I can organize a national strategic planning retreat with impact players that were just like us from around the country. I'm happy that I can organize a conference and bring people in community. Because it's in the community that if Kentel or Swinks or Supreme don't have the answers, it's in that community. So one of the things that I want to do is build community, but community has many stratas: education, economics, philanthropy. So understanding the terrain of which I was coming home to and understanding the nonprofit industrial complex. This is not an indictment on all nonprofits, but it is a scheme that they have in place to keep us in this perpetual rat race of pursuing these crumbs. So through entrepreneurship is what I want to model. When I met and when I used to meet with the young men across prisons, MCI Norfolk, MCI Shirley, Concord Farm. I knew they like getting money. I knew they like shiny things. But they also shared with me that they were hurting, that they wanted to heal from their hurt, because they seen examples come before them do the same. Entrepreneurship is a great vehicle to build movements. If we, my judgment, I believe that if we do not develop our own philanthropic arms to fund our nonprofit programs, when we encounter Donald Trump as president, well, one of the spaces I operate in is called Community Violence Intervention. Pre-2020, that space had little funding from the federal government. After 2020, it saw over $500 billion in federal funding. Greg Jackson, who was the director of gun violence prevention under President Biden, distributed, and Eddie Bonanegro, which I know Brazy and Kentel also met. He's former gang leader from Chicago, who was at the height of government in the DOJ. So if we don't think impact is happening, right? We need to really get the cobwebs out of our eyes and stop looking through the lens of rose-colored glasses that was painted by the system of white supremacy. Again, looking through rose-colored glasses that was painted through the lens of white supremacy that would tell you your brother's success really ain't shit. He ain't doing nothing. He's not getting anything. That's not gonna go nowhere. And think about all the revolutionary movements through the annals of history and how they started. People-oriented, ground up, inclusive. So what I'm trying to do is build that movement powered by people.
And thank you so much. Let's just give, at this juncture, a round of applause for our amazing panel. And you really named both community as what you're building and also a need. And so I want to hear from the community, if you have any questions that you would like to pose the panelists. I'll start right here.
I'll try to be quick. I have a lot of things to say. First, I want to say thank you guys for coming here to change stories. So, I'm Patrick. I'm starting at the university for so 2023, me and my PR did a paper on restorative justice in Chicago, particularly dealing with females in high school age. And one thing we found is that their restorative justice program wasn't effective and that there wasn't any buy-in. And we tried to figure out why, right? And we interviewed about 34 girls. There were a lot of mental health themes we saw in that they found that restorative justice kind of counteracted their mental health. For example, let's say a girl disrespects me, right? I have to get retribution. If I don't, I'm going to look at me as if I'm less than always, right? So what would you guys have to say in that intersection post? What did you say that really impacted you is the 10%, 10%, 80%? Somebody who's in 10% with you, how would I really clear up that muddiness in the mental aspect of retribution to get that 8% on my side? That's a bit of a question, but
Only if we can say it with that cool voice.
Well, I mean, you know, mental health is definitely a stigma still within our community. And we have to, honestly, we just have to keep, you know how, if you look at rap, I keep going to rap, and I'm not even supposed to be listening to rap.
Nah,
You should.
Leave me
lies.
alone, right? But if you look at the transformation to rap, like you have to like keep playing a song over and over, and you'd be like, that song was just whack. And then after a while, it's like, it's kind of catchy, right? You start bopping to it, and everybody start making little dances and everything to it. Then it's like, that same marketing way that we do things with things like hip hop is the same thing with like mental health. I know we're trying to have more of the conversation, but it's just like, it has to be something that's like taken seriously, but also has to be a way like we could really catch those young girls, just be like, I don't wanna talk about the things, cause that's what, it comes back to the vulnerability piece. Like, you're asking these young girls who have things so bottled in, and young men, especially areas like Chicago, even Roxbury, Springfield, like the inner city, like everything that's just been bottled in. Like, you're asking them just to put on this table and just be like, all right, let's just talk about it. You cannot do that when you're talking about mental health. It has to be like one key thing that they feel comfortable talking about, and let's explore it. And then when that container's done, we move on to the next one. I feel like with this mental health piece, like, let's just talk about this, like, hold on. Like, we don't, your daddy issues, it kind of feels like you're really messed up because dad would, like, hold on, relax, maybe that's not the thing that she wants to talk about, what he wants to talk about. Like, find out one thing they feel like that's a common theme with those groups, and just go until that container's done. I don't know how long it's gonna take. We keep trying to rush things. Let it play out. It takes 10 years, and then we're gonna keep having this one conversation about whatever it is for 10 years, and then we move on to the next one.
So what I would add to it is that, like I spoke about going inside DYS every week. And so me and him, we go to a different unit, and it's boys. And the two other people that we going with, they go to the girls unit. And every time he comes back from the girls unit, he be like, it's crazy out. It's like, it's not the same. And he's done both. Like, he's kind of like my boss. So he's been on the boys unit, he's been on the girls unit. He's just like, they are just on a whole nother frequency. And so we have to deal with them a little bit differently. So that's one thing. And then two is just persistence beats resistance. It's kind of like what he was saying. It's just like, yo, show up. Cause I've been in, we go in there every week, and then there's the cool kids that, man, I ain't doing that shit. Man, that shit's whack, bro. And that's how they talk to us. Man, I ain't doing that shit, man. This shit's stupid. Man, they're like 14, 15, just disrespectful. And it don't matter. I'm still gonna show up. I'm still gonna be there. I'm still gonna be present, and we still gonna hold that space and hold that circle. And then a month goes by, and then they sitting like outside of the circle, but close to the circle. And then 2 months go by, and then they saying in the circle, but they're not talking. And 3 months go by, and then now they talking a little bit, but they're not opening up to it. But that's how it happens. You know what I'm saying? We going in there every day for 6 months straight. There's plenty of kids that's in there like, man, that's stupid. And then once they get in, and then they see what it is, and see how it's affecting them, and see how they learning so much about themselves. Is one kid that he bought into it too late, because as soon as he bought into it, he aged out of DYS. He's like, damn, I wish I would have took more advantage of it while I was here. And so sometimes that happens. But I know we had somewhat of an impact on him. And then there's the sad reality is just sometimes it ain't gonna work. Some people just not going, is part of what he was talking about. Some people just not gonna buy into it. But I do think, like, persistence beats resistance, and I do think showing up consistently matters. Like, there's nothing, showing up consistently matters. I seen that. I see it, not seen it. I see it with my own eyes every week I go in here.
So, emotional illiteracy, psychology. Again, where there's no vision, the people will perish. I understood me after I spent the first 5 years of my sentence inside of a box, locked up 23 hours a day. I had to look and confront someone that I did not like, that I thought was the worst of the worst, that I really wanted to stomp out and beat down. Then I had to stomp out and beat that person down. But getting to that stomping out and beating down, I had to go through this psycho-emotional battle within myself. I think Ali hit on it earlier. We'll justify all the things we inherently know is wrong. We all are born with an innate moral compass that tells us right from wrong. When I was in that box, the first thing that came crashing to me was the question of, how did you get here? I didn't know that I would find out years later that this was part of the continuum of restorative questions. Then looking at my how, then I began to examine my why. And then I began to wrestle, like, yo, really, that was some dumb shit you just did. Then I had to own my responsibility and acknowledging that was some stupid stuff I just did. a couple of things I would want to know about that program that was studied. Who designed it? Was it culturally competent? Did it have lived experience associated to it? I would want to know those things off the rip. I guarantee you, I can design or co-design a program where it would be effective for little girls. My brother Kentel talked about earlier the Repair Harm program. Being an advisor and a consultant on the development of that program, very, very aware of how it's structured. He said it was 33 weeks, and he was like, "Damn, 33 weeks
It's a long time.
is a long time." What Ali just hit on is that we cannot count time. We have to keep ourselves in this program process. Because you said that young man said, "Damn, I wish I had more time." When we negotiated with the prison administration and we told them that our program was gonna be 52 weeks, they were like, "Huh?" Because it's a system of getting people through. We don't care about justice, get them through. Listening, I'm gonna come back to Dr. Ken Hardy. Dr. Ken Hardy theory is predicated on a 4-step process of devaluation, dehumanization of loss, disrespect, and rage. We have to listen to it. We have to stop trying to solicit something for the fact to say, I am so and so and so PhD, and I quantified the study of this is why so and so and so and so forth did, right? When we go through these individualized assignments, just as my brother said, what is your early childhood memory of pain and why? Adverse childhood experiences, how many? I did not acknowledge my adverse childhood experiences growing up. It took for me to be in that box initially, then inside of a program that was 34 weeks long to recognize those harms. But the harms that I was recognizing first and foremost were the ones that was taking place inside of me. So now I was gradually becoming emotional literate. Now I understand what I'm feeling, why am I feeling, and know how to process that feeling before I lash out on someone else and perpetuate a cycle of hurting people. So what I would say for those girls, what do girls and boys have in common? They're both human. Just need an approach that listens to them. Because that's what Dr. Ken Hardy and Dr. Tracy Laszlo said in their book, Teens That Hurt, that if we slow down long enough to really listen means to comprehend. My judgment here means just to register sound. If I did that, you heard a sound. But you don't know what that sound meant. But if I did, and you know the cadence of that beat, it's like, yo, suit up, march out. We're about to get busy. We have to listen to our young people. I mean, really, really listen to them. They will lead us.
Thank you. And just for the sake of our time, I think I might ask for the next couple questions if they're directed for an individual person, knowing that the whole point of restorative justice is that it's an ongoing relationship that is being built. And so this is not the only time that we will have together. But we'd love to pass to someone else with this.
Whoever wants to take it, first I can talk about, guys, thank you guys for coming. When you guys talked about, working with kids that are incarcerated, I was in a penitentiary last week, and when you guys talk about when you're actually there and giving them advice, they really do absorb it, like talk about like they want money, that's really their mindset. And I just wanted to ask you in regards to mentorship, a lot of programs work on working at the penitentiary, right? But I don't think there's enough going into the community in regards to specifically, let's say, like high schoolers. So these same kids out there are ones in high school. So have you guys thought about working more within the high school to change their mindset before we get to that point? Who wants to take it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as our approach, with my nonprofit and other organizations I work with, one of the person I was talking today is the brother Ted. He has spent which is a social wellness lab, deals with at-risk youth. So it's like, how do you prevent it before it actually gets to that prison, the school to prison pipeline? So we try to disrupt it there. You know, and that's like the key thing. It's like, you have to have representation of people that says, hey, listen, I've been down that road from A to Z. We don't thought this thing all the way thoroughly through 3 times. Yeah, sometimes people like, well, maybe you went A to Z 1 time. Like, no, I did it 3 times. Same result. So, you know, just being able to, so we have programs like that. I spent on the nonprofit that I started. Yeah, we have to try to see like how we can, you know, stop it right there before you actually commit the crime. You know, so yeah, there is projects like that, and TPP as well. And they're out there in the community, making sure that we disrupt it before they actually start thinking like, oh, this is cool. Like, it's not cool. And social media makes it look like it's all right to just go and spin and drill on somebody, but they're not really letting you like the realities behind what you're seeing. Like this is the heartache and pain that comes with it. You still make that choice, but I'm just letting you know, like, you gotta hear this other side as well.
Are y'all in DC? Are y'all in DC?
Nah,
We can make it happen. Okay, that's what I'm.
okay.
You from DC?
I go to school there, yeah.
Oh, let's do
Howard,
it.
yeah.
Well, please.
Oh, Stanley is
Yeah,
Reese.
yeah,
He knows Stanley.
Yeah.
He's about to be at the conference, National Conference of Higher Education in Prison.
What was this?
Once.
No, I want to talk about it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Get it right.
Make sure you also get the.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. And first, thank you all for being here. My name is Sakil Ruff. I'm from Cornell, with these 2 right here. And I just wanted to first kind of recognize that all of you have a serious, I feel like, skill in terms of being vulnerable, and especially when being first approached with this idea of restorative justice practices. How are you able to be vulnerable with yourself? How are you able to kind of break down those barriers that I guess society really does place, especially on men? I know you were talking about that a bit earlier, and yeah, I just want to know like about that specific process. Like, how did you break that down for yourself? Anyone take that?
It's just so hard, like being vulnerable, especially when you add prison into where everybody's a tough guy and everybody's masquerading, and you just have to show a different side of yourself. You know, being vulnerable in a prison setting, it doesn't work to your advantage in any way possible while you're in there. So that makes it a little bit different. So as far as how was I able to be vulnerable, I just was like I just was at that point in my life where I was trying to change certain things about myself anyways, and I was questioning a lot of the things or choices I had made. And I wanted answers with that. So I was able to dig deep and tap into that. But I found myself crying in a circle like 3 times. I'm like, bruh, like, it's just like, oh, I'm like crying, got my hat on, I'm like trying not to put people to see me like that. It's just because you feel it's a sense of guilt, it's a sense of embarrassment. It's like all of these feelings that come up for me when I'm recognizing that other people are getting to see me in this vulnerable state. And to be able to get past that, it's a process. You know, that doesn't come overnight. It's a process. So I think just when one is patient with itself, yeah, that's how you get to that point. But it's not an easy process either. We're so callous, we're so hardened just by life in general that it makes the process that much more difficult. But it's definitely possible to get there.
Well, and just to close us out, I mean, I wanted to offer, I wonder, in the practice of vulnerability, if anyone would be interested in offering a grounding activity to the room to close us out. If not, I have a little 4-7-8 breathing, but just wanted to offer that to the panel.
Why y'all looking at me?